The day started with pure chaos for Talia Morgan. As a single mother trying to make ends meet, she was already balancing on a tightrope. A junior assistant at the formidable Cross Enterprises, she woke up to a dreaded message. Her babysitter had bailed. Last minute, no other options. This left her with the choice she'd never wanted to make, taking her 6-year-old daughter, Ava, to the one place a child didn't belong, the corporate heart of the city. Hurrying Ava into her clothes, Talia brushed through her daughter's tiny curls, her own heart pounding with anxiety. She whispered a silent prayer, hoping the company's CEO, the infamous Damon Cross, wouldn't be in one of his notoriously cold moods today. Talia was already living paycheck to paycheck, and losing this job would mean losing everything. Gripping Ava's small hand, she walked into the towering, glass-walled building. The air buzzed with the sound of busy footsteps, which suddenly slowed. People stopped and stared. But they weren't staring at Talia. They were staring at Ava. More specifically, their eyes were fixed on the small, silver pendant hanging around her neck. It was shaped like a delicate crescent moon. Ava touched it constantly, a little habit for comfort. She never took it off. Her mom had told her it was a gift, a very special one. Just as they stepped into the main lobby, the elevator doors slid open. Out walked Damon Cross himself. The billionaire CEO, known for his sharp suits and even sharper tongue, was a figure of pure intimidation. His officiant secretary, Piper Lee, trailed behind him, reciting his schedule for the day. But Damon wasn't listening. Not to a single word. His gaze had snagged on the little girl standing beside Talia. It wasn't the child that stopped him. It was the pendant. His eyes locked onto the silver moon, and in that single, heart-stopping moment, his entire demeanor shattered. The hard, emotionless mask he wore every day crumbled, replaced by a look of frozen shock. It was as if someone had stolen the very air from his lungs. Damon Cross was a man who never stopped, never hesitated, never showed a hint of uncertainty. But now, he was standing perfectly still in the middle of his own lobby, unable to move, unable to breathe, unable to look away from Ava. Talia saw him staring, and a wave of panic washed over her. She instantly assumed he was furious about a child being in his pristine office. Pulling Ava gently behind her, she whispered, "Don't look at him, sweetheart." But Damon wasn't angry. He wasn't even seeing Talia. He was seeing a ghost. A memory he had buried so deep, he thought it could never claw its way back to the surface. He was seeing Celine, Avery, his first and only love. The woman who had vanished years ago without a trace, without a single word of goodbye. The woman who wore that exact same moon-shaped pendant every single day. His chest tightened with a pain so sharp it felt physical. Memories flooded his mind. Celine laughing. Celine whispering his name. Celine smiling as that same silver moon glowed softly against her skin. And now, here it was. Her pendant. Hanging around the neck of a small girl, no older than 6. A little girl who was now peeking out from behind her mother's legs, her big, curious eyes wide. And those eyes? They were so much like Celine's that for a second, Damon thought his heart would stop beating. Piper, his secretary, noticed his strange reaction and wisely took a step back, sensing that something had shaken her boss to his core. But Talia, caught in her own fear, misunderstood the entire scene. Convinced she had broken a major rule, she hurried forward, bowing her head nervously. "Mr. Cross, I'm so sorry, sir," she stammered. "I had no choice today. The babysitter didn't show up. I promise Ava will not disturb anyone." Damon barely registered her apology. His focus was entirely on Ava, who, feeling his gaze, stepped out just a little. She clutched her pendant with a shy, innocent smile. And that smile, it ignited something inside Damon he hadn't felt in years. A chaotic storm of warmth, confusion, fear, and a spark of impossible hope. A single, unbelievable thought echoed in the silent chambers of his mind. This little girl. Why does she feel so familiar? There was no logic to it, no reason. But every instinct, every fiber of his being, was screaming that this child was connected to him. Connected to Celine. Connected to a truth he wasn't sure he was ready to face. As Talia started to gently pull Ava away, trying to escape his intense stare, Damon finally found his voice. It came out soft and shaky, a tone he didn't even recognize as his own. "Wait, please." The entire lobby fell silent. Every employee within earshot froze. Because Damon Cross never, ever said please. Not to anyone. But today, he did. Because in that one moment, seeing that pendant on that little girl, he knew his perfectly controlled, empty life was about to be turned completely upside down. He knew, that shocking moment in the lobby was just the beginning. Damon Cross, the CEO, who seemed to have the world at his feet, couldn't shake the image of Ava Hart in that silver moon pendant. All morning, he tried to work. From his glass office on the top floor, he stared at contracts, scrolled through emails. but his mind was a million miles away. It was stuck in the past, replaying memories of Celine Avery. He remembered her laugh, the way she'd press her hand to her chest when she was surprised, and that pendant. How it shimmered in the sunlight. It was so familiar, so impossible to forget. Every time he looked out his floor-to-ceiling window, he saw them. Talia Morgan, working diligently at her desk, and little Ava, coloring quietly beside her. They had no idea about the storm raging inside him. His famous composure, the powerful, unshakable demeanor that everyone in the business world knew and respected, was starting to crack. He found himself watching them, almost without realizing it. He noticed the way Talia's hair fell across her face as she concentrated, the way Ava's tiny fingers traced the edge of her own pendant while she hummed a little tune. He saw them share a laugh, a simple, ordinary moment that hit him like a bolt of lightning. It reminded him of everything he'd lost, and everything he thought he'd never have again. Piper Lee, his assistant of many years, knew him better than anyone. She could read every sigh, every furrowed brow. She saw he was distracted, his eyes soft when they were usually razor sharp. She approached his desk quietly. "Mr. Cross, are you feeling all right?" she asked, her voice full of concern. Damon just waved a hand dismissively, not even looking at her. "No, just nothing," he muttered. But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't true. In Damon's world, nothing was never just nothing. This was something big. Throughout the day, it was a constant struggle. During important meetings, he'd find his gaze drifting back to Ava. He'd pretend to be checking spreadsheets on his tablet, but really, he was just stealing another look. Every time he saw her, it was like seeing a ghost. She had Celine's eyes, Celine's smile, that same vibrant energy that could light up a room. The possibility that this little girl was connected to Celine, his Celine, made his heart race and his chest tighten. He felt restless, on edge. He started making up excuses to walk past Talia's desk just to get a closer look at Ava, to see that pendant sparkle under the office lights, to hear her laugh. And then he heard it, her tiny voice calling out, "Mommy." It was like music, but it was also like a key turning in a lock to a room he had known was there. Talia couldn't help but notice the CEO's strange behavior. The frequent glances, the almost gentle smile he gave Ava when she waved shyly at him. She started to wonder if he wasn't the cold, untouchable tycoon everyone made him out to be. But why would a man like Damon Cross care about her and her daughter? The thought made her nervous, flustered, but also a little hopeful. His attention didn't feel threatening or creepy. It felt different, like it was tied to something deeper, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. Meanwhile, Damon's mind was a whirlwind of memories. Celine's words from years ago, their shared laughter, their promises for a future that never came. Life had been so cruel, tearing them apart before he could even say a proper goodbye. And now, here was Ava, small, innocent, with that same pendant glinting under the harsh office lights. Damon didn't have a single piece of proof, not one logical explanation, but he knew. He knew in his gut that Ava held a piece of Celine inside her, a piece he couldn't ignore, a piece that demanded he face the truths he had buried for so long. Right then and there, he made a silent promise to himself and to the memory of Celine. He would protect this little girl. He would watch over her. He would find out how she was connected to his past, all while maintaining his cool, professional exterior in front of his entire company. It was a daunting task, but he felt a new sense of purpose. He was already thinking of ways to help Talia without her even asking. Ways to make Ava feel comfortable and safe in this sterile corporate world. He needed to be near them, but he couldn't risk scaring them away. With every hour that passed, Damon Cross, the unshakable billionaire, the master of his own universe, felt himself being pulled into a current of new, unfamiliar emotions. This wasn't about power or business or control. This was something far more dangerous and far more precious. It was care, it was a budding affection, and it was a spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, fate was giving him a second chance. He didn't know where this path would lead, but for the first time in years, he felt a pull towards the future, a future that suddenly included a woman with determined eyes and a little girl with a silver moon pendant. Talia Morgan tried her best to focus on her work, but it was impossible. Typing reports, answering emails, organizing files, everything felt 10 times harder today. The reason, a tiny, energetic force of nature named Ava Hart, her 6-year-old daughter. Having Ava in the office was a last resort, and the little girl's curiosity was boundless. Her laughter and constant stream of questions filled the otherwise quiet space. And with every giggle, Talia's anxiety grew. She just knew someone would complain. Or worse, the cold and notoriously strict CEO, Damon Cross, would finally lose his patience. Every time Talia risked a glance up from her monitor, her heart skipped a beat. she'd see him, Damon Cross, walking past her desk, his steps unusually slow. Sometimes he'd even pause, his sharp, intimidating eyes fixed on Ava. But the glare everyone in the office feared was gone. Instead, his expression was unreadable, softened, different. Talia couldn't figure it out. Was he annoyed, intrigued, or was it something else entirely? The uncertainty was eating her alive. She couldn't afford to lose this job. Not after everything she'd sacrificed, not after raising Ava alone for 6 years. As the morning wore on, Ava, despite being the source of Talia's stress, also managed to bring small moments of joy. She'd hold up a crayon drawing for Talia to admire, a bright, colorful masterpiece. Then, with the innocent confidence only a child possesses, she offered one to Mr. Cross himself. She even started asking him questions about the office, things no adult would dare to ask. Why is your chair so big? Do you get to eat candy at your desk? Talia could feel the eyes of her coworkers on her. She could hear the whispers. Some were judging, their disapproval hanging heavy in the air. Others, she noticed, were secretly smiling, charmed by the innocent chaos Ava had brought into their sterile corporate world. Damon Cross, however, missed nothing. He saw the way Talia gently hushed Ava, explaining the rules of the office. He saw the small, tender moments when she'd smooth her daughter's hair or straighten her little dress. And as he watched, something deep inside him began to stir. It was a feeling he hadn't experienced in years, a mix of admiration for Talia's quiet strength and a strange protective urge toward this mother and child. Here he was, a billionaire CEO who controlled a massive empire, a man whose word could make or break careers, yet he felt completely powerless against the force of Talia's resilience and Ava's disarming charm. He found himself wanting to help them, to ease their burden, but he had a reputation to maintain. So, he made a secret move. He discreetly instructed his assistant, Piper Lee, to set up a small play corner in an unused part of the office. He asked for crayons, coloring books, and soft toys, a safe haven where Ava could play while her mother worked. He never said a word about it, just watched from the seclusion of his office as the little space was prepared. And as he observed them, a strange, unfamiliar warmth spread through his chest, a feeling that confused him more than he was willing to admit. Later that day, when Talia discovered the play area, her eyes widened in disbelief, then filled with tears of gratitude. She found Damon near his office and whispered, her voice thick with emotion, "Mr. Cross, you didn't have to do this." Damon just gave a small nod, his lips curving into an almost shy smile, a sight no one at Cross Industries had ever witnessed. He felt an inexplicable pull toward them, a connection he couldn't rationalize. It was the little girl Ava. She reminded him so painfully, so perfectly, of Selene Avery, his first love, the woman who had vanished from his life years ago, leaving an ache in his heart that never quite healed. As he watched Talia and Ava laughing together in the new play corner, Damon could feel the armor he'd worn for years begin to crack. The cold, strict facade was melting away, replaced by a storm of new feelings. Fascination, longing, and an urgent, consuming need to know everything about them. He needed to understand their story, their lives. In that moment, with the low hum of the office around them and the whispers of coworkers fading into the background, Damon Cross realized his carefully controlled, predictable world was being turned upside down. It was becoming complicated in the most beautiful, unexpected way. A thought kept replaying in his mind, over and over. Maybe fate had brought Talia and Ava here for a reason he didn't understand yet, but one that was already weaving invisible threads around his heart, binding him to them in a way he'd never known before. His life was changing, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't want to stop it. It was just after lunch, a quiet afternoon in the office. The sun streamed through the tall windows, casting long, warm stripes of light across the floor. In a small corner Damon Cross had set up, little Ava Hart was happily playing with her crayons. The sunlight caught the silver moon pendant around her neck, making it sparkle as if it held a secret of its own. As Ava leaned forward to grab a toy that had rolled away, the delicate chain of the pendant suddenly snapped. The small silver moon fell right into her tiny, waiting hands. Her eyes widened, and her little lips began to tremble. In a soft whisper, she said, "Mommy, it's broken." Talia Morgan immediately rushed to her daughter's side. She knelt down, her voice a soothing balm, comforting Ava and assuring her that everything was going to be okay. But Damon, who had been walking past the play corner just then, froze in his tracks. The sight of the broken pendant in Ava-esque small hands made his heart pound so hard he thought it might burst from his chest. Holding that same moon, even seeing it from afar, felt like touching Selene Avery again. It was a memory reaching out to him from years ago, a ghost from a past he thought was long buried. Before Talia could react, Ava, sensing a strange calm radiating from Damon, toddled over to him. She held up the tiny pendant, her innocent voice, a clear bell in the quiet office. "Uncle Damon, can you fix it?" The words hit him like lightning. He bent down slowly, his hands trembling as he reached out to take the little pendant from her. He turned it over and over, examining every curve, every shine, every small, familiar dent. A wave of emotions washed over him, confusion, hope, fear, and a deep, aching longing all at once. There was no mistaking it. This pendant was the one Celine Avery had worn, the one he had searched for, the one he had thought was lost forever. And now, it was here, in the hands of a child who had the same eyes, the same smile, the same gentle way of holding it that Celine once had. Talia watched him, a puzzled expression on her face. "Do you know this, Mr. Cross?" she asked, her voice tinged with curiosity. Damon finally looked up at her, his voice barely a whisper, shaky and soft. I knew someone who had this, years ago." Talia's eyes widened in surprise and confusion. Ava, sensing the weight of his words, but not fully understanding, simply tilted her head and held out the pendant again, a silent plea for help. With steady fingers, though his hand shook on the inside, Damon carefully fastened the broken chain. Every second he held the pendant, memories of Celine Avery flooded back, for laughter. Her voice, the promises they had made, and the crushing pain of losing her. He couldn't stop himself. In a quiet, unsure voice, he asked Talia, "Who gave this to Ava?" Talia hesitated. Her heart began to race. The question felt bigger than it should, heavier than she expected. After a moment, she answered softly, "Ava's father. He gave it to her before he left. I never saw him again." Damon's eyes widened, his chest tightening as if in a vice. His mind spun with 1,000 possibilities, trying desperately to connect the dots. The pendant, this slow girl, the past he had tried so hard to bury. Ava, oblivious to the storm brewing, smiled innocently and hugged the newly fixed moon tightly to her chest. In that moment, Damon realized that fate had brought them all here, to this very office, on this very day. The pendant was more than just a piece of jewelry. It was a key, a sign, a message sent from the past. His hands gently cupped Ava's, and he whispered, almost to himself, This belongs to someone I once loved. Someone very special." Talia watched, stunned and worried. Damon's usual calm and confident demeanor had been replaced by something she had never seen before: vulnerability, wonder, and a strange, unspoken connection that made her own heart race. She could see it in his eyes. The simple pendant around Ava's neck had unlocked something powerful, something that neither of them was ready to fully understand. But one thing was certain: it was something that would change all of their lives forever. What could this connection mean? Who was Ava's father, and what was his link to Damon's lost love, Celine? This is just the beginning of a story that's about to unfold, full of secrets, love, and death. Later that afternoon, Damon Cross found he could no longer ignore the questions racing through his mind. He was walking past Talia Morgan's desk, where Ava sat coloring quietly beside her. He finally stopped. His chest felt tight, and his voice, though low, was firm. "Talia, I need to know the full story about this pendant." Talia froze. Her hands, clutching Ava's coloring book, began to tremble slightly. This was the moment she had feared for 6 long years. The moment someone would discover the secret she had carried all alone. The secret that Ava's father was gone, that he had promised to care for their child in some way but had never returned, leaving her to raise Ava on her own. Damon's eyes saw. He knelt slightly, bringing himself down to their level. The weight of years of longing and pain pressed down on him. He spoke quietly, his gaze fixed on the small, silver charm. "The pendant? I recognize it. It belonged to Celine Avery, my fiancée, years ago." Talia's breath caught in her throat. Her heart began to race. The impossible connection she had sensed was now becoming painfully, terrifyingly real. She shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. "Celine, she passed away, giving birth to Ava. I promised her I would protect her baby. That's all I can tell you." Damon's eyes widened. A torrent of emotions flooded his expression: shock, disbelief, and a flicker of hope. It was as if the entire world had stopped for just a moment. He reached out, his hand gently taking Ava's. His voice shook with the weight of his next words. "Ava, this means you're her daughter." Ava looked up at him, her wide eyes filled with innocent curiosity. She tilted her head, sensing the gravity of the moment but not fully understanding its meaning. Talia swallowed hard, trying to hold back the tears pricking at her eyes. She felt exposed, vulnerable, but also strangely relieved. Finally, the truth was no longer hidden in the shadows. Finally, the connection she had feared would destroy her life was instead beginning to explain everything. Damon slowly stood up, pacing a little as he tried to process the revelation. Memories of Celine Avery came rushing back in vivid, painful detail. Her infectious laughter, Her radiant smile, the gentle way she held his hand, the dreams they had shared for their future, and then, the sudden, staggering thought, Ava, this quiet little girl coloring at the desk, carried a part of Celine inside her. A part of the woman he had loved more than anything in the world. For a moment, Damon felt overwhelmed. He didn't know whether to be angry at fate for its cruel twists, grateful for this impossible gift, or simply terrified of what this meant for all of them. Yet, amidst the chaos in his mind, one thing became crystal clear. He could never let anything happen to Ava. He could never let Talia struggle alone. He could never let the past be forgotten again. He looked down at the little girl who had already, in such a short time, begun to steal his heart. He whispered softly, almost to himself, the words forming a solemn vow. I have to be there. For her, for you. Hearing the raw sincerity in his voice, Talia felt a warmth spread through her chest. It was a confusing mix of fear, hope, and the fragile beginning of trust. She realized that Damon Cross, the man who had once seemed so cold and untouchable, was now fully aware of the truth. He was fully involved, fully connected to them in a way that neither time nor loss could ever erase. Standing quietly nearby, Piper Lee noticed the distinct shift in his demeanor. She saw the new softness in his eyes, the careful, protective way he looked at both Ava and Talia. She knew, as did everyone else who was silently observing, that something extraordinary was unfolding in the office that day. A long-buried truth was breaking open, a truth that would undoubtedly change all of their lives forever. It was a story of love, loss, and the promise of new beginnings. Damon extended his hand to Talia. It wasn't a gesture of business, nor one of polite formality. It was an act of quiet understanding, an unspoken promise of support and shared destiny. Talia reached for it, her fingers closing around his deep in her heart. She knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. The pendant, the child, and the enduring memory of Celine Avery had brought them to this pivotal moment, a point of no return. It was a moment filled with hope, fear, and the first real stirrings of a love that had been waiting years to finally. The shocking truth about Ava Hart's connection to Celine Avery had turned Damon Cross's world upside down. He simply couldn't ignore this little family that had crashed into his life. With each passing day, he found himself caring more deeply for Talia Morgan and her daughter, Ava. He was noticing things, small details he'd never paid attention to before. The graceful way Talia's hands moved when she was deep in concentration at her desk. The gentle firmness in her voice when she corrected Ava for a small mistake. The quiet strength she projected when she spoke to her staff. Every little discovery made him admire her more. Ava, blissfully unaware of the emotional storm swirling around her, had started to see Damon differently. He wasn't just the powerful CEO of the company anymore. To her, he was a kind, patient, and gentle presence. She started calling him Uncle Damon, and every time she said it, her innocent smile melted his carefully constructed defenses. It made him want to be someone she could always rely on, someone who would never let her down. He found himself wanting to protect that smile at all costs. Damon tried to maintain his usual professional distance, to keep that wall up he had built so high, but it was a losing battle. He found himself inventing excuses to be near them. He'd casually stroll over to check on Ava in the play corner, his heart doing a strange little flip when she'd look up and beam at him. He'd offer small gestures to make Talia's workday easier, bringing her a coffee, taking a minor task off her plate. The simple sight of the two of them together, smiling, laughing, or even just sitting quietly, brought him a profound sense of joy he hadn't experienced in years. Piper Lee, ever observant, watched all of this unfold from a distance. She saw the subtle but undeniable changes in Damon. His normally strict, almost severe demeanor was softening. She saw the rare, genuine smiles that only appeared when Talia or Ava were near. She noticed the casual touches a hand on Ava's shoulder, a light brush against Talia's arm that betrayed feelings he hadn't even admitted to himself. The ice around Damon Cross's heart was finally beginning to thaw, and Piper knew exactly who was responsible. Talia, for her part, was still cautious. It was all a bit overwhelming, but she couldn't deny the warmth she was beginning to feel from Damon. It was completely unexpected. She was starting to realize that beneath the billionaire's sharp, intimidating exterior was a man capable of incredible tenderness, patience, and understanding. Slowly, tentatively, a bond was forming between them. It was built in moments of shared laughter over Ava's antics, in quiet conversations after a long day, in silent glances across the office that spoke more than words ever could. It was an unspoken connection that neither of them could ignore any longer. Damon found that Ava's presence brought out a protective, gentle side in him that he thought had died with Celine. He felt this fierce instinct to shield her from the world, to keep her safe and happy. And Talia was beginning to feel a spark of hope. The man who had once seemed so untouchable, so far above her, was now showing himself to be someone who could genuinely care for them, someone she might even be able to trust with her heart and with her daughters. As the days turned into weeks, Damon's thoughts were consumed by them. He would find himself strategizing ways to make their lives easier without overstepping, without making Talia feel indebted to him. He'd linger by her desk, hoping to catch a glimpse of Ava's infectious giggle. He'd initiate quiet conversations with Talia, not about work, but about her day, about her dreams, about anything and everything. His heart would soften every time she looked at him with that mixture of surprise, gratitude, and a simple, human warmth that felt more valuable than any business deal he'd ever closed. Ava's innocent affection for him grew with each passing day. Her tiny hand would instinctively reach for his whenever she felt nervous or unsure, a simple gesture of trust that made his chest tighten with an unfamiliar emotion. Her laughter echoed in his ears long after she'd gone home, bringing him a pure, uncomplicated happiness he hadn't allowed himself to feel since he lost Celine. He was starting to remember what it felt like to be happy. The heavy secret of Ava's parentage hung in the air, a constant, unspoken weight on all of them. But paradoxically, it was also the very thing that was forging this powerful bond between them. It was a reason to protect, a reason to care, and perhaps, a reason to love. Damon was beginning to understand that love wasn't always about grand gestures or dramatic promises. Sometimes, love was in the quiet, everyday moments. It was in the sound of a child's laughter, in the quiet strength of a mother, in the stolen glances that spoke volumes without a single word. Talia started to realize that Damon's presence, which had once been so intimidating, was now a source of comfort. He was steady, he was sincere, and he gave her a sense of hope she hadn't dared to feel in years. She felt safe with him, and for a single mother who had fought so hard on her own, that feeling was priceless. Damon knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that what he felt was no longer just admiration or curiosity. It was something much deeper, much more profound. It was love ineffable, unstoppable, and terrifyingly fragile all at once. He felt like he had been given a second chance. A second chance at happiness, at connection, at having a family. And he could see, with perfect clarity, that protecting Talia and Ava, being near them, and allowing this love to grow was the most important thing he had ever done or would ever do. As they spent another quiet evening together in the office, the city lights twinkling outside the vast windows, a comfortable silence settled between them. Ava was asleep on the small sofa, her chest rising and falling rhythmically. Talia was finishing up a report, her brow furrowed in concentration. Damon just watched them, his heart full. He realized that no matter what challenges the future held, no matter how complicated things got, these moments were real. These feelings were real. This budding love was the start of something lasting, something that neither time nor circumstance could ever take away. It was a new beginning, and for the first time in a long, long time, Damon Cross was ready to embrace it. The office was empty, the only sound, the quiet hum of the air conditioning. It was then that Damon Cross asked me to meet him on the rooftop. The city lights sparkled below us, a dazzling carpet of diamonds, casting long, dancing shadows across the concrete. He stood there, his usual commanding presence softened, and beside him was little Ava Hart, clinging tightly to my hand. His expression was serious, yet gentle, a mix of emotions he could no longer hide. He spoke first, his voice low, almost hesitant. "Talia, I think I understand the truth now. About Ava, about Celine, about everything." My heart pounded against my ribs like a drum. I shook my head, my voice barely a whisper. "No, you don't." But he stepped closer, the space between us shrinking. He held up the small pendant that Ava still clutched in her hand. Then, he showed me an old photograph. It was him and Celine Avery, both smiling, lost in a moment of pure happiness. And there it was, Celine's delicate fingers resting over the very same moon pendant Ava now held. "Celine was my fiancée," he said, his voice thick with a past I never knew. "Before she disappeared, she told me she was going to have a child." My eyes widened, and the tears I'd held back for so long finally started to well up. My lips trembled as the truth, a secret I had carried for years, finally spilled out. "Celine passed away during childbirth," I whispered, the words tasting like ash. "I promised her I would protect her baby." "And Ava's your daughter, Damon." The silence that followed was heavy, absolute, broken only by Ava's small, innocent voice. "Uncle Damon, why are you crying?" Damon's chest tightened, and he bent down, his movements slow and deliberate. He gently lifted Ava into his arms, and the tears he'd been holding back began to run freely down his face. The little girl who had unknowingly stolen his heart from the moment they met was also the child of the woman he had loved most in the world, the woman who had left him far too soon, but had trusted him even in her absence. I stood beside them, a silent witness to this life-altering moment. I reached for his hand, feeling the immense weight of the past years, the profound relief of the truth finally being set free, and the fragile beginning of something beautiful that had been waiting for all of us. Damon's voice was a soft whisper, filled with a raw happiness I'd never heard from him before. I'm not sad. I'm happy. Happy that I found you, Ava. And that I found you, Talia. Ava hugged him tightly, her small arms wrapping around his neck. Her bright, innocent smile lighting up the entire rooftop. For the first time in years, Damon looked complete. A powerful mix of love, relief, and hope filled every corner of his heart. My own eyes shone with tears of gratitude. The man who had always seemed so untouchable, so distant, had now become our ally, our protector, and the father figure Ava had always deserved. As we stood there together, under the vast night sky, the moon above seemed to shine a little brighter, reflecting in the silver of Ava's pendant. Damon seemed to realize something profound in that moment, that love has a way of returning. Even after devastating loss, even after years of waiting in the dark. That sometimes, fate gives us a second chance, an opportunity to heal, and a moment to start over. I saw a silent promise form in his eyes, a vow to Seleni's memory that he would protect, love, and cherish both me and Ava for the rest of his life. Seeing that sincerity, that unexpected warmth, I felt a flutter of hope in my own chest. The first spark of a love I never thought possible growing between us. Ava giggled, completely content, feeling the love that now surrounded her from the two adults who held her entire world in their hands. Unbeknownst to us, Piper Lee had been watching from a distance. As she quietly left the rooftop, she knew that a new chapter had just begun for us. A chapter filled with joy, with healing, and with an unexpected love that had bloomed from a forgotten promise. Standing there under the sparkling city lights, Damon, Ava, and I knew we had found something truly priceless. We had found family, we had found trust, and we had found the beginning of a love story that would last a lifetime. All because of a small silver pendant, a brave little girl, and a promise that had never been broken. Thanks for watching. Follow us for the next part of this incredible story.